We want to encourage applicants to apply without feeling that their whole life is going to be, it's going to take their whole life to fill out the application.
Okay, thank you.
Good point, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Did you have a question?
You know, my only question relates to the rolling interview posting versus waiting until the end. All of the interviews will be open to the public under Bagley-Keene, so I'm not sure how I understand the benefit to withholding those videos from the rest of the public when someone could easily attend the interview and hear the questions and answers.
That is true, but not all the people who apply, I suspect that not all the people who make the final interview process are going to be able to travel in person.
So only those who could travel would have the advantage.
Right, so that's also could be an unequal advantage.
Would it not benefit those who couldn't travel to have this equal footing and be able to see the videos?
Yes, well, that's why we, well, that is true, it could, but if they can't see, if the person goes first in the process and is not able to see the other interviews, then it would be unfair. So that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Douglas Johnson. I'm with the Rose Institute of State and Local Government, one of the signers of the California Forward Letter, and just want to briefly hit a couple of fairly technical points. And these are covered in our letter, and I'll have a couple of other points that aren't. The first is 6818, the definition of most qualified applicants. The language as it's written, it appears to allow flexibility for, in the last 5 years, for an applicant to have changed between declined to state and a party and back and forth. It's clear that they can't change parties, but it's not clear that they can't go to declined to state and back. And so we have some suggested language to clarify that. There's also a couple of timing points. In 60846, it appears that information coming in from the public late in one phase, if it's too late, it would be ignored. There are other sections of that that say if it's late in the phase, consider it in the next phase. So there's just a resolution of that conflict. One other more substantive issue, and I think others may mention this as well, in 6826, the definition of relevant analytical skills, it talks about experience with complicated statistical analysis, with complicated software, and we think those are a little too exclusive. They would exclude too many people for a couple reasons. One, the type of software that's used in redistricting is really expensive. I know the leading software right now is $10,000 a copy. So that's really an economic barrier. And with the statistical analysis, really you need experts for this. You would not expect anyone coming off the street to have this kind of background. It's very specialized. So there's really no realistic way for someone to apply claiming to be an expert in racial bloc voting and voting rights statistical analysis. So I think the language in there is a little too limiting, and we have some suggested language for that. One other point that's not from the letter, so this is speaking as Rose Institute, but I'll save us time by covering it all at once. In the application, this is also fairly generic, and I think the others would agree, but we didn't cover it. At the end, there's a section on activities after the essays. My suspicion, looking at this from the viewpoint of an applicant, is that the relevant activities will have already been included in the essays. And my suggestion is, rather than have people get confused about where to put things, just make that final section other information that the applicant might feel is relevant. It would also eliminate confusion over something that doesn't quite fit into a given box. They could put it in there. So there's more, obviously, in the letter. Again, thank you. This is a great starting effort, and you guys did clearly put a lot of work in that paid off. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do any of the panel members have a question? No? Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Eugene Lee, and I'm the Voting Rights Project Director at the Asian Pacific American Legal Center. which is a nonprofit organization based in Los Angeles. I first wanted to start by thanking your office for the amount of time and effort you put into preparing these regulations. I think that they clearly reflect the product of a lot of really good thinking and a lot of time, so thank you. I've been asked to present 3 points that are in the working group letter, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I'm going to start with point number 10, which talks about our recommendation for the definition of diversity contained in section 60814. Our recommendation there is that the diversity definition should be revised to more closely mirror the statutory language in Proposition 11. From our recollection of the interested persons meeting, as well as our review of the transcripts from those meetings earlier this year, it was clear to us that various stakeholders urged the BSA to make the application process one that is open to all individuals regardless of economic status, and to remove barriers that may prevent individuals from lower income backgrounds from participating. And we commend the BSA for taking that into account and doing things such as not requiring applicants to travel to interviews at their own expense, and not requiring them to demonstrate skills or experiences that are available only to folks with disposable income. So we commend the BSA for drafting regulations that reflect this. We have some recommendations that some of my colleagues will talk about for improving that, but for the most part, we think the regs do a fairly good job of making sure that there are not these barriers in place. But we would draw a distinction between removing barriers for folks regardless of economic status on the one hand, and then on the other hand, including economic diversity in the definition of diversity in section 60814. So this definition is used by the ARP when it's carrying out sections 60848 and 60850 when it considers the composition of the applicant pool and whether it reflects the diversity of the state of California. We think that the intent is good, but this could result in some unintended consequences. When the ARP is trying to balance the various aspects of diversity contained in the diversity definition, it's got a fairly difficult task on its hands, and we think that the addition of economic diversity to those different aspects of diversity could make that balancing task more difficult in a way that undermines achieving the other aspects of diversity. So our recommendation for 60814 is to have the language more closely reflect what's in the statutory language in Proposition 11 by striking out the word economic from that definition. Our recommended language is in the appendix to our letter. The second point that I wanted to address is our recommendation in point number 25. So it's just a general recommendation. We don't have a specific set of language to recommend, but it's a general recommendation saying that if the auditor establishes additional reduction phases, so additional phases where the applicant pool is reduced from the initial batch of applications received, if the state auditor does create such an additional reduction phase, it should apply the same requirements that the ARP has to follow in sections 60848 and 60850. So right now, the auditor, when it looks at the phase 2 and the phase 3 reduction periods, it's got to follow certain provisions. And so we would recommend that if there's an additional reduction stage, that those same provisions be applicable. The last point I wanted to make with regard to the working group letter is our recommendation in point number 1. So we have proposed revisions for the definition of state office in 60828, as well as the definition of appointed to federal or state office in 60804. So let me start with the first, the definition of state office. Our recommendation is to revise the language for clarity and also to make it consistent with previous interpretations of state law.